everyone! Welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. The holidays are fast approaching, and two of the most highly requested projects that we get this time every year are Christmas ornaments, so Christmas decorations, and Christmas-inspired gift bags. So today's tutorial pulls double duty. But first, we want to thank Lion Brand Yarns for sponsoring today's video. We've put a link to lionbrand.com in the description box and the pinned comment, so you can check them out. In particular, we are going to be using Heartland yarn today for today's tutorial. And what is it we're making? Santa sacks! These adorable little things are useful, you can wrap gifts in them, and they're also very pretty too. I like the fact that we're going to use Heartland for this project in particular. We use Heartland for several Christmas-oriented projects here on the show and have in the past. I love it because it's acrylic, so it's easy to use, it's nice and smooth between the fingers. It is easy to wash if you have to. It comes in such nice colors. Colors that really make me think of Christmas. They're kind of rustic, they're classic, but it has this little sheen to it. So Heartland, it's got just a bit of something extra, and it makes your Christmas projects look a little bit rich, and I feel like that's perfect for this time of year. These little bags are great. They're going to make your wrapping up a whole lot easier this year. We're going to show you how to make them narrow, a little wider still. This is a super simple project that we've designed for you today. Very easy pattern, and you can make them striped, solid colored, anything you like. I like the Heartland yarn so much, I'm using 3 colors for it today, and you can get several little bags out of 1, 2, or 3 balls of Heartland yarn. Useful, and even after all the presents are unwrapped, you can stuff them full of tissue paper and plunk them back down under the tree and make them look nice again. I find after all the presents are gone, after everybody's opened everything up, the tree looks a little sad, so I like to have things to put back there. And these double as useful gift wrap and pretty little Christmas decor too. Anyway, enough said, let's grab our Heartland yarn, we'll grab our hooks, we'll head on over to the craft table, and we will stitch up some Santa sacks together. I have 3 different Heartland colors for my Santa sack today. Now you can use 1 color, 2, 3, 4, however many colors you want. You can make it solid colored or striped. I'm making it striped. You need 120 yards total for the entire Santa sack. So you can easily get 2 bags out of 1 ball of Heartland. But because I'm using 3 colors, I only need around 40 yards per color. So I'll be able to get several Santa sacks made out of these 3 balls. I've got 3 pretty colors. This one is Redwood. I also have Cuyahoga Valley, and I've got Great Sand Dunes as well. So a pretty green, a nice beige, and red. You want a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, a stitch marker will be handy for this project, and today's hook is a 5.5 millimeter, also known as an I or a 9 in the US, a 5 if you have old hooks from the UK. And once you've got all that together, we can get started. You can start with any color you like. We're going to make a slip knot. And we're going to chain 33 to begin. 3, 3. Alternatively, if you would like to use the foundation half double crochet technique, you can foundation half double crochet 32 stitches. Please visit our shop and purchase a pattern. It helps support our show, and we'll put a link to our shop in the description box down below. Once you have 33 chains, you're going to skip the first chain from the hook, find the second, and half double crochet into it. You're going to half double crochet in each chain all the way across. You'll have 32 half double crochets at the end of row 1. And if you were doing the half double crochet foundation technique, then you should have 32 foundation half double crochets, and you will already be at the end of your first row. We should all be at the end of row 1. We will all have 32 half double crochets, and this is a good time to use your stitch marker. You're just going to make a note of this edge. So this is the edge of the Santa sack that is going to be the top. For row 2, we're going to chain 1, turn. Every row in this project is a chain 1 turn row. We don't use the first chain from the hook, that's just a turning chain. Instead, we're going to half double crochet into the next stitch and half double crochet into the stitch after that. Now we're going to chain 1, skip a stitch, and half double crochet into the next stitch. This is the top of the second row. So every even row will start with chain 1, turn, half double crochet into the first 2 stitches, chain 1, skip a stitch, and then you'll half double crochet into every single stitch thereafter. The reason we are going to keep a stitch marker up here on the top of our sack, so that tells us that this is the top of the bag, is so that we always remember when we get to the end and we turn around that we want to make sure we create this chain 1, skip 1 space, because this is going to become a drawstring hole for us. All right, that's the most complicated part of this pattern. You can now half double crochet into every remaining stitch all the way back to the end, and I'll catch up with you at the bottom. When you get to the end of a row, because we're using the chain 1 turn concept, that last stitch is sometimes pulled down a little bit, so it might look like it's part of the edge of the fabric. It's not. Don't forget to miss that stitch. If you're unsure, count them up. You should have 32 stitches in every single row. And your even rows, that includes the little chain 1 here, so that counts as a stitch, this little guy. So 32 stitches in every single row. If you're changing colors, we're going to snip our yarn, fasten off, and join the next color. If you're not changing colors, you're going to chain 1, turn, and half double crochet in every single stitch, including this chain 1 space, all the way back up to the top. But for those of us who are changing colors, you can snip your yarn, fasten off, grab your next color. I'm going to switch to this beautiful green. Make a slip knot. Turn your work. You're going to join in the top of that last stitch with a slip knot, nice and easy. You can work over top of your tails or leave them out and weave them in later. Chain 1 and half double crochet into the same stitch that you joined in. So that chain 1 is sort of that turning chain. It kind of gets us up to the right space or the right height, but you're going to half double crochet in the same stitch that you joined in, just as though you didn't change colors, you just chained 1, turned, and half double crocheted into the first stitch. So that's the beginning of your color change. Half double crochet into every stitch all the way back up. This is sort of the odd row of the pattern, so it's just straight half double crochet. Again, I'm working over top of my little tails. You don't have to do that. You can always leave them out and weave them in later. But I find that I have a fairly even tension, so if I work over top of my tails, they typically don't come back out. Half double crochet in every single stitch. Don't forget, when you get up to this chain 1 space, you can just half double crochet into the space. You don't have to try and fish out the little bits of the chain 1. So just half double crochet right into the space. Treat it as a stitch. You'll have 32 stitches at the end of row 3. That's 32 stitches at the end of row 3. So that's a full row of color change. You'll notice that I worked a half double crochet right into the space, the chain 1 space. I didn't bother fussing with the chain 1 stitch, just use the space. And then 2 more half double crochets to finish off that row. Count them up, you should still have 32. And our little stitch marker up here at the top reminds us that we've gotten to the top of our bag. So that means when we chain 1 and turn, to turn around and come back down, we have to create another little eyelet or another little drawstring hole. Continue to skip the chain 1 because that's just your turning chain. Half double crochet into the first 2 stitches. And then chain 1, skip the next stitch, and half double crochet into the stitch after that. That creates our little eyelet or our drawstring space, and you'll see now that every other row you're going to have a little drawstring. So this is basically building the drawstrings into the bag as we go. Half double crochet in every remaining stitch. You'll still have 32 stitches at the end of row 4, and I'm going to change colors again. At the end of my second row of color, this is also row 4, I have 32 stitches. I'm going to change colors again, so I'm going to snip my yarn, fasten off. If you're not changing colors, you can just chain 1, turn, and half double crochet in each stitch all the way back up. Don't forget, there's that little chain one space right here that you want to, right here, that you want to use. I'm going to flip my work, grab my next color. I'm switched to this Great Sand Dunes color now. It's this nice little sort of sandy, kind of goldish color. Join with a slip stitch in the first stitch. Make sure I get the right yarn end. There we go. Chain one. That gets me up to the right height, and half double crochet in the same stitch. So I've kind of like chain one turn and then half double crochet in the first stitch. So you do all that in the first stitch. Again, I'm going to work over top of my little short tails. I'm going to half double crochet in every single stitch all the way up. I'm not going to miss the little chain one space. I will half double crochet into that, and I will still have 32 stitches when I get up to the top. That's the end of row 5. That is another fully finished row of color change, so you can sort of see how that's shaping up. Again, I'm using the whole space to half double crochet into. I'm not fiddling with the chain that runs over top of it, but I am counting as a stitch, so you should have 32 stitches. Our little marker reminds us that we're back up at the top, and because we're turning around to come back down, we need to create a little drawstring space. So chain one, turn, half double crochet into the first 2 stitches. Remember, you're always skipping the chain one. So that's a half double crochet into the first 2 stitches. We want to chain one, skip a stitch. That should be right in alignment with this space right here. Half double crochet into the next stitch and half double crochet into every stitch all the way back down to the bottom. You'll still have 32 stitches. Now, you can work along at this pattern, remembering that every second row has the drawstring space built into it. That's why we've got our little stitch marker up here. You can move it along if you feel it helps to kind of have it a little closer to your work so you don't miss it or forget it. You are going to work 24 rows in total of this pattern. I'm going to change colors every 2 rows, but of course you can use your discretion, however wide you want to make your rows, or I should say your stripes. Or if you're working on a solid colored bag, of course you don't need to change colors at all. You're just chain one, turn at the end of every single row. But don't forget that on every other row, no matter whether you're changing colors or not, you've got to make sure to add that little drawstring space in there so that we have our drawstrings built into the top of our bag. I will let you work at that, and I will see you at the end of row 24. At the end of 24 rows, I've been changing color every 2 rows. This is what the little Santa sack looks like so far. So the reason I say do 24 rows is because when you fold it in half, this is going to be the width of your Santa sack. If you want it to be wider, you can continue to add rows. So another 6 rows will give it another 3 inches, another 12 rows will give it another 6 inches, and so on. And an easy way to tell how wide you might like it is to just kind of pull back that edge to the edge of there's 3 rows, so it would be that wide if you add another 3, and if you pull it back again, so there's 12 rows, it would be that wide if you add another 12, and so on. And this way you can sort of decide how wide you want to make your Santa sack. Now, for every 3 rows you add, you're going to be using around 15 yards additional yarn. So just keep that in mind if counting your yards is important to you. Now this is a nice narrow little bag. I have sort of some goodies in mind for it. And this is where I'm going to end the repeating pattern for the sack rows. So now we want to give it some seams. I slipped my hook back inside my working loop. My little sack has been folded. So this is the foundation chain row. That's the last row of the pattern. I'm going to put those 2 rows together. I'm going to chain 1 and turn, and we're going to slip stitch up the side. So we're going to make a seam by slip stitching. We're going to slip our hook through the first stitch and the corresponding first foundation chain. If you did the foundation half double crochet, this would just be a stitch. So what you're doing is you're finding the pairs of stitches and you're going to slip stitch. Find the next stitch and the next corresponding chain. I like to try and get under both loops of that chain and slip stitch. Try not to make your slip stitches too tight, and just sort of work away at slip stitching up the edge. And what you'll end up with is a nice little running chain on this side and a tidy little stitch running up the other side. Once you get all the way up to the top, you should have a nice tidy little running stitch running up one side and the chain stitch running up the other. Remember, you're trying not to make it too tight because you don't want to accidentally bug hole that edge. You want it to be nice and sort of stretchy. You can fasten off when you get to the top. And take a moment to weave in any tails that you have, and then we're going to seam up the bottom. We don't need our stitch marker anymore. It's pretty obvious that this is the top of our sack, but you do want to decide which side facing out you like. So for example, this is very obvious stitching. Now you might like that aesthetic, you might not. Keep in mind that we have to seam up the bottom and that we're going to use single crochet, so that is going to show. So if you want all of your stitching to show, then you're going to leave this side facing out and the single crochet will show across the bottom. If, on the other hand, you'd prefer to have no visible seam, so if you flip it inside out, there's the actual seam, but of course it doesn't really show. You can just sort of turn your bag all the way around and that seam doesn't really show. So if you want an invisible seam, then you're going to leave your bag facing this way so that this is the side that you can actually see the seaming on. That's where we put the seam in, and we're going to single crochet across the bottom. If on the other hand you want to show the single crochet as sort of part of the stitchery, then flip it right side out so that you're looking at whatever side out you're facing that you like, because that's the side that the seam is going to show on. So I don't want my single crochet seam to show, so I'm going to do it this side, and then I'm going to flip the whole thing inside out. You can use any color you like to seam up the bottom of your bag. I'm going to continue with this beige. And remember, this is the top. You don't want to seam up the side that has the eyelets. You want to seam up the bottom. You're just going to slip your hook through a couple of loops on either edge, so either side of the bag. Join with a slip stitch, chain one, and single crochet in the same place. And now really all you want to do is just steadily work your way across the edge of the bag, looking for an edge loop. So I'm going to get my little tail out of the way here. So you want the loop of a stitch on one side and the loop of a stitch on the other side. Now you can leave your tail out and sort of weave it in later, or you can single crochet over top of it. You want a loop and a loop from both sides. And this is how you're going to seam up the bottom. So there's another loop and another loop. Trying just to get one. Pause every once in a while, especially if you're making a bag that's all one color, to make sure that you haven't got any gaps. And you can just steadily work your way across the whole bottom edge of the bag. Stitch count here doesn't matter. You just want to make sure that there's no obvious gaps in the bottom edge seam of your bag. Once you've single crocheted a seam all the way across the bottom, just take another moment to double check that you haven't got any gaps in there. So slip your hand through, sort of feel your way around the bottom, make sure there's no holes. And I say again, this is why this is actually kind of attractive in my opinion, this little single crocheted seam. So if that's something that you like the look of, you might consider making a few more sacks with visible stitching. Otherwise, we will use that as the inside. You can fasten off, take a moment to weave in your two tails, which I will do in a little while. But first of all, let's take a look at how this looks when you fold it right side out. So once again, that seam kind of disappears, the side seam, and then you just punch out the two bottom corners, and you have a very neat and tidy little bit of stitching running across the bottom. So let's make sure our little corners are out, and no real visible seams. So nice little tidy seam across the bottom, and then no real visible seam across the side. Now we want to make a couple of drawstrings. You can of course use a ribbon or cord or twine or anything else you might like that you have lying around that's decorative, but if you just want to rely on your crochet yarn, then let's chain some drawstrings. I've already made one. This is 75 chains long, and that is good for a narrow bag. If you made one that's more medium sized, like you added an extra 3 stripes or 6 rows, then I recommend 100 chains. And if you're making one that was large or an extra 12 rows, like I was demonstrating earlier, then I would recommend 125 chains per drawstring. And we want to make 2. And it's really simple. All we're going to do is make a slip knot on our hook and start chaining. I have made 75 chains in my first one, so that is exactly what I'm going to do in my second one. Once you've chained the right number of chains, and of course you can really make this as many chains as you want, depending on the size of your bag and your need, your tension, your yarn, etc. Just make sure that you make 2 identical. You're going to fasten off, pull that nice and tight, grab the other side and make sure it's a nice little tight knot too, and then hold both of them together, and you're just going to trim so that it's nice and small. And once you've got 2 little drawstrings, we can do our little drawstring magic. We're going to start at one side and work our way around. So take drawstring number 1, start at the edge, find the first drawstring space, and then just weave it back and forth, in and out, through those little chain 1 spaces all the way around. And then you're going to take both ends of that drawstring, hold them together, and tie a knot. This way they won't come undone. There we go, nice and tight. And you can sort of even it out so that it kind of hangs to the end. And alternatively, you can also add some beads to that before you tie the knot, or you can keep it nice and plain like this one. So now we're going to take our other drawstring and we're just going to do the same thing but going in the other direction. So you can try to poke it through a hole that's pretty much opposite the other side, and it doesn't matter if it's going in and out, sort of opposite to the other drawstring. As long as you're not missing any of the holes. There we go. And same thing. Take the 2 ends, hold them together. I want to make sure that doesn't undo on me. There we go. Hold them together and tie a knot. Come here, you. And then you can do the same thing, just sort of make sure that it's evenly out the side. And then you can just pull them together and it cinches up the top nice and tight. And if you want, you can sort of tie them together in the front, make a little bow, or just let them hang in a little knot like this. It's got a really nice rustic sort of look to it. It's really easy to open them. You just sort of grab the mouth of the bag and pull it open, and then grab both strings and shut it up again. I like that dual drawstring effect. And of course you can tie it in a knot, tie it in a bow, leave them hanging. You can add buttons or bells or things like that to the bag. And hands up anybody who did a row 2 and forgot to put in a drawstring hole. Had to take out a couple rows. Anyway, like we said, very easy pattern. You can really vary it up, make them wider still, depending on what it is you need to wrap up, and you can reuse them over and over and over again. So it's kind of like a gift that keeps on giving. We hope you enjoyed making this project along with us this week, and thanks again to Lion Brand Yarns for sponsoring us here at the Jayda InStitches Show. We will see you soon. Have a great week, everybody. Stay safe, stay crafty, and get ready for Christmas. Bye, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.